Do you get annoyed when people refer to them as windmills?
I guess there probably was a time when I did, only because, a windmill creates mechanical energy versus a wind turbine creates electrical energy. But you just, over the years, I think you become a little bit desensitized to it.
Maybe annoyed is not the right word. It's actually a little bit comical.
Don't confuse wind turbines with windmills. The latter are popular in Dutch culture and work to convert wind to mechanical energy, usually from milling grain. Wind turbines convert wind into electricity to power homes and businesses with clean energy. Admittedly, both turbines and mills are cool, but one clearly has more of a future than the other when it comes to ushering in an era of enhanced sustainability.
It's estimated that about 60,000 wind turbines have been constructed throughout the United States, and with an ongoing shift to clean energy solutions, more are certainly on the way. Some industry experts even estimate that renewable energy construction, specifically as it pertains to wind projects, is projected to increase by 30% every year in the near term.
In this episode, we're talking all things wind energy and how Barton Malow is helping to build a more sustainable future.
Utilizing goats to clear vegetation on a steep hillside to save on manpower and ensure safety. We've done that. Watching a world-renowned architect crumple up a piece of paper and tell you that's how they want their building to be designed? We've been there, too. Ever envision a bricklaying robot or material lift unit assisting laborers with building? No, it's not something out of the Terminator. We've done that on our projects. Every project has a great story. With over 3,000 team members and nearly 100 years of experience in the construction industry, we at Barton Malow have more than a few to tell that don't fit the usual industry coverage. I'm Eric Fish.
And I'm Rob Riley.
And we're both Barton Malow team members and the hosts of this podcast. And we're going to be bringing you the untold stories from the job site. The weird, the wild, and the unconventional paths to success. It's construction, but it's said differently.
Welcome back to Said Differently, a Barton Malow podcast. In this episode, we're excited to be joined by fellow Barton Malow team member Courtney Murchison. Courtney, thanks for hanging out for a bit.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Excited to talk about renewable energy projects.
Barton Malow entered the wind energy market in 2008 and have since established ourselves as a go-to builder in renewable energy. We've completed more than 20 wind projects, erected over 500 wind turbines, dedicated more than 1.75 million man-hours to this construction, and we were one of the first Michigan contractors to join the 1 Gigawatt Club.
For reference, 1 gigawatt of power is roughly equivalent to 110 million LED bulbs.
To talk a bit more about our early beginnings in the market and how we got to where we are now, we're excited to bring in Barton Malow Senior Project Manager and member of our wind energy team, Ryan Johnston.
My name's Ryan Johnston. I'm a project manager. I've been here at the company going back to 2008 was the first year I interned, actually on one of our first wind projects. So been here working year to year in wind, been able to see a lot of neat things over the years as this has evolved, and really excited for where it's headed going into the future here.
What makes wind so much more exciting or so much different of a project compared to the other projects?
I think what's really neat is just the large scale of the projects. And when I say large, they cover so much ground and they're really logistics driven. You get to bring in a lot of our different self-performed disciplines and involve them in the project. You've got big equipment, big materials. It's just, it's a really fascinating thing to be a part of.
So prior to wind, were you working in any particular market?
I've gotten to see some various things through the years. When I first started out, I got assigned to rigging, so I got to work across a multitude of projects, a lot of automotive, and then ultimately at the end of the summer started to get a little bit into wind. At that time, wind was really new to us, and one of the things I was tasked with was, hey, try to figure out what this wind thing is. So I literally started by getting on Google, getting on the internet, and starting to understand the different turbines, the different models. I remember making a little bit of a book, for each model that was out there and what OEMs were out there. And I remember calling around to them, just trying to get our hands on some installation manuals so we could start to understand what it meant to put one of these together.
So what was it, 2008 that we had our first wind project?
2008 was our first wind project, and that was with Heritage Sustainable Energy. we got connected and got to talking. And we started with 2 turbines, 2 Furlander, 2.5 megawatt turbines. And looking back, it's kind of funny because you look at the foundations that we built back then for those turbines to what they are now. And the cranes we used actually a Manitowoc 21,000 on those 2 turbines, and we broke the whole thing down and moved it to the next site. It's a crane that we wouldn't be able to use nowadays, in the fashion that we build farms. But it's neat how we started and where we've come to.
Talk a little bit about that developer, because I remember you and I talking about that was pretty unique, right?
So this first farm of the first 2 turbines, which they called the pilot phase, was really his first venture into it. So it was as new to him as it was to us. But we knew that, it really fit us well, because back when we had Oak Park self-perform and everybody was based out of there, it was going to involve a little piece of everything we were doing. It had a civil component. It had a concrete component. It had a rigging component. It was a good model and something, I think it was a good bite for us to first get involved in the industry.
Looking back on that first project or those first 3 projects or 4 projects, and then to the last one that you've done, can you talk about just the major differences?
Yeah, for sure. After that 4th year was really when we started to try to break into the production style wind. So the bigger farms. Obviously, as I stated earlier, those early on farms were pretty small in quantity of turbines. As we went into our 5th year, that's when we got our first large farm, which was 69 turbines with DTE. The difference is we had to change our mindset of how we built them, from just bringing in a crew and building something from start to finish to now really breaking down the work into more small, manageable tasks that a crew would just repeat from site to site to site as you progress through the project.
How was it working with DTE for the first giant wind farm that we did?
I think it was a learning experience for everybody. It was DTE's first time developing their own farm. For us, it was a big project. It was spread over 2 counties, spread over 3 different cities. I want to say our total area on that project was about 90 square miles. So logistically, it was a big project to get around.
So what does the 1 gigawatt milestone reached on the Meridian job site in mid-Michigan mean for Barton Malow, DTE Energy, and sustainability in general?
So for us as a company, it comes down to experience. So when you hit that gigawatt mark, what it does is it adds up the nameplate of each project that we've built through the years. What that helps us do is then advertise to our clients our experience in the industry.
What does it mean to you personally, since you were here in the beginning of starting on wind farms?
It means that you've now become a large player in the market, and to be a part of it and just see everything that we've learned along the way and to achieve this is, it's pretty gratifying. It's cool to see us get to that point in the market.
Well, this has been awesome, Ryan. Thanks again for your time. Thanks for coming in and chatting with us.
Appreciate you guys having me. This has been great.
Wind farms aren't your typical construction site. Rather than work taking place in a confined space on a block or street, the footprint of a wind farm can span hundreds of square miles, usually throughout rural farmland. And as you might expect, there are various challenges associated with this type of work across such a vast amount of land.
For a little more insight into what it's like working on a wind project, let's bring in another member of our wind energy team, Barton Malow Senior Project Manager, Curtis Brown.
So let's just start by talking about what makes building a wind farm different from any other project.
One of the biggest differences is just the size of the project itself in terms of the area that you're covering. You think of a traditional building or a power plant that is being built. We call it like a postage stamp site because it kind of resembles a postage stamp. It's usually squared off, has fencing around it, and you've got pretty good control of the area. And from any one spot in the project, you can usually see everything that's going on. Versus a wind farm that generally in Michigan will cover anywhere from maybe 30 to 50 square miles, depending on the size of it. The logistics of managing safety, managing quality, and even managing how to get people and equipment to those work locations is drastically different. That is also what makes them a little bit more fun to build too, because you have some unique challenges that way. There are challenges that we don't have that you have on like I said, a postage stamp project where, there you got space constraints. You're trying to operate and use really large equipment in a very small area. We don't have that problem quite as much, but again, we're, kind of got the opposite problem.
So how are wind turbines installed?
As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the areas that we're typically building these in are rural areas with roads that are sometimes dirt, sometimes paved, but they're not overly wide. They're not, they're basically just not built for an industrial project to come into that area. So before even turbines get there, we spend a considerable amount of time engineering and planning the routes that the turbines are going to take to get into the project. And then we actually, in most scenarios, have to widen the public road with gravel, and we go into the ditches in the surrounding field temporarily to put gravel down to make the swing a little bit more palatable for the component trucks coming in. We also have to build infrastructure to get to the turbine location. So we build a pretty large series of access roads, we call them, to get out to those locations. Those are typically gravel, and they're stabilized underneath with a cement content to stiffen it up a little bit, because again, it's a farm field. So we build those roads to get out into it, and then we dig an excavation to get down to the elevation that we're going to place the foundation at, and then we put a foundation in, and depending on the wind turbine model, usually anywhere from, call it 400 yards to 600 yards of concrete per foundation goes into it.
So how much pre-work is going on then before these things actually start to arrive on site? How long are you guys there kind of mobilizing?
The pre-construction and the planning and the engineering sometimes can go on for years, even before we're involved as a contractor. Usually then we'll pick up the engineering, and that'll go on for 6 to 8 months before we mobilize the site. And then once we've mobilized, the process of building a laydown yard, building the, we call them temporary turning radiuses or temporary public intersection improvements, then building access roads. A lot of times that's a 2 to 3 month process before turbines components actually start arriving to site. The overall span of construction of a wind farm is actually relatively short compared to what we're doing and how much work we're putting in place. But it does take several months ahead of that to plan it to achieve that. So once the foundation is in, and I mentioned it's 400 to 600 yards depending on the wind turbine model, usually 30 to 35 tons of rebar in it. We'll backfill that, and then we start getting to the point where we can take turbine deliveries in. We also have to build a crane pad, because they're relatively large cranes that we're using out in the middle of a field. So we beef up the soil a little bit to handle the loads that the crane will impose on it. And then we start taking the turbines to the site. The most common tower we've built is a GE model. Usually that comes in 8 major components, 3 tower sections, 3 blades, the hub, and the nacelle, which the nacelle is kind of the box at top that the blades hook onto and houses a generator. And that's kind of where everything happens up there. So you think 8 major components, and at the Meridian project with 77 towers, we calculated that to be a little over 600 major components that were coming to the site, oversized loads and police escorts in certain states and that kind of sort of thing. So it's a pretty large logistical undertaking to get those to site.
So there's obviously a lot of coordination involved in these projects, and I think one of the big stakeholders, so to speak, is the landowners. What's it like working with them? Are there incentives that they get for having these turbines built on their land?
Yeah, the landowner management and coordination is actually one of the more interesting parts of a wind turbine. It's actually one of the reasons it varies quite a bit from a traditional project. Also, I hadn't mentioned this earlier, but instead of having one customer or one person that owns the property you're working on, sometimes you have hundreds of different people that you're working on their property. So it is a very important part of the project. Generally, they do get incentives. It depends on the utility, the owner of the project. Those can vary to some degree, but the folks that have turbines on their property are getting basically a lease payment. So the utilities don't own the land; they lease out the ability to put these turbines on it. There's also an underground infrastructure that goes in place for the electrical collection of the power. Generally, there's some payments that go along with having that infrastructure on your project. And then some of the owners and some utilities in the state will actually provide incentives to people that are just in the area too, because it does impact the whole community, not just the people that have the turbines and the infrastructure on their site or on their property. So again, depending on the utility, it can vary, but most times there is incentives.
Have you had anybody in the community or a landowner be surprised at how well the job is done, and also be surprised at the care that you take of the property? Are they surprised that, maybe they had an opinion at first that they didn't want the project there, and then they changed their mind afterward? Yeah,
we have. We've had both that, folks are impressed and surprised with the speed in which we build these. It is a little bit of a misconception on the size of these. It implies that they'll take a long time to build, but they generally don't. I mean, a whole park can go up in a season. So folks are generally surprised about that. And through the landowner management and getting out in the community, talking with people, a lot of times we're able to manage that expectation and let them know like, hey, quite frankly, we're going to mess some stuff up. That's what we have to do to build it. But we always come back, we'll fix it. We'll fix drain tile. We fix some of the grading that's in the area. We replace topsoil so that farmers can grow healthy crops in the future. So it sometimes can be tumultuous throughout the project, but generally by the end, when they see the end result, there's a lot of positive feedback on what we've done.
Anything else, Curtis, that you want to say about, the wind work that you've done over the last 3 years or anything else?
I'll end with this. This happens not just on wind farms, but the end of a wind project assembly it's a feeling unlike I've had in my career. You put your heart and soul and you spend time away from your family, and you kind of get this coalition of folks out on your project, and you're kind of in the battle together, right? And you're dealing with all the challenges. But when the last turbine, the last major component goes up, it's just a feeling unlike any other that we've built something, and it's something that me and my family are going to see for at least 30 years, if not more. And it's something that you don't get everywhere. Another feeling comes as you really wrap up the project, but the really good feeling comes right at the end of the turbine assembly. And it's like I said, nothing I've had in my career before.
One of Barton Malow's longtime clients and leaders in creating a more sustainable future is none other than DTE Energy. In fact, we recently put the finishing touches on DTE's Meridian Wind Park in mid-Michigan, the largest wind project Barton Malow has performed since entering the market in 2008.
For more insight on wind farms and renewable energy, we're excited to welcome DTE's Manager of Renewable Energy Development, Matt Wagner, to the podcast.
Matt, I was doing some research on LinkedIn on here. So
that must be interesting.
So you studied environmental engineering. So you've always been environmentally conscious, right? And what drove you to study that, and like what led you down this path to where you are now with DTE?
Well, what drove me to study, I've always been interested in the outdoors, loved wildlife, but also was pretty good at math and science. And I tried to figure out something that could sort of blend all those things. The company has always been very strong on environmental stewardship, DTE, but they realize at a certain point, we got to increase our focus on the environmental aspects.
Can you just talk a little bit about developing, that section of land that's been approved, or, you guys have vetted everything and you're like, okay, this is a go here. We're going to set up a wind farm in this 50-mile radius.
So we look at wind resource, we look at land availability. Farmland is fantastic for doing wind because it's already pretty much cleared. And so, we looked at that area. We looked at several townships that we thought would be conducive to that. And then the first thing we really do is we have land agents go out and start talking to the landowners. And that's a combination of garnering their interest and educating them at the same time about what we're about. The relationship management piece of doing wind development is huge. And if you don't do that well, you may never have a project.
Mm-hmm.
And so our site manager, Jason Hanneth, did a tremendous job of just keeping everybody connected and listening to them. And I often tell my land agents and our site managers, I want to hear bad news, and they sometimes need to be an advocate for the community. If the community doesn't feel like we're listening, because we got to find that line where we just got to get everybody on the same page. That's how the project goes best.
What types of things do you communicate to these communities that help them decide whether or not they want them? Like you mentioned, education is so big. Yeah. Like what types of things do you bring about as in terms of benefits?
The things that we try to reinforce is local tax revenue is really a big deal. We don't know what the revenue coming from Meridian will be, but, I can tell you without any doubt that it's going to be in the millions of dollars over the next 20 to 30 years or whatever the life of the project is. We know from other communities, Gratiot County's got a lot of projects there. They've seen since 2012 revenues from taxes of about $60 million.
Wow.
And then in Huron County, over at least 1 3-year period, Huron County does not report it as openly as some do, but we've seen revenues from taxes of nearly $30 million. And, two things. One is, particularly during COVID, communities are hurting, financially, and they're really looking forward to this revenue. And I can tell you the Meridian communities are very excited and looking forward to, the tax revenues and other things. And, these dollars go to emergency services. They go to police, schools, other vital functions in the community, libraries. And each community kind of divides it up a little differently. State gets some too in the counties. But it's a big deal at a time when folks are wondering where, the next funding's coming from. But, the other aspects that we tell people about when we come into your community is, Meridian's a great example of this. You guys are a missioning company. You guys went out and hired for Meridian almost exclusively local folks who work at, the laydown yard and on the project. And I think the total on a daily basis is roughly 200 employees a day that are working. And, that number sounds really good. They're all coming from Saginaw, or most of them are coming from Saginaw and Midland counties. A lot of people might say, well, but those people are eating lunch. A lot of those people are, spending money at a hotel for months and months on end and so that's kind of the unspoken boost to the local economy is just, the workers' everyday needs. And then more broadly, DTE's investment has created or sustained a total of about 4,000 renewable energy jobs, mostly in Michigan, which is 4,000
awesome.
jobs is 4,000 jobs. The other thing I wanted to talk about just more generally about community engagement for Meridian, but also just in general, when we start a project, and I think you guys know this, we talked about it with our first project. We want to become part of the community. We don't want to be there just because we need something and then disappear. And a lot of our land agents and site managers will say, they kind of joke about hashtag DTE good neighbor. And we want to live that hashtag. We want that to be real to the community, and so we invest a lot of hours as volunteers. We contribute time and funds to many events. Future Farmers of America, that's kind of a no-brainer when we're there. First Robotics is a big deal. Girl Scouts. We've also engaged community partners like Saginaw Futures and Midland Community Foundation. We're involved in the county fair livestock auctions. And when our leaders found out we were doing this years ago, they were like, say what? You're buying pigs and cows?
Yeah.
But you know what? We're doing that because it's a junior livestock auction and it's kids who raise these animals. And so we get to support the kids and their families by bidding on animals. And I've done a number of them myself. I've overbid and bid against myself and outbid myself when I didn't know what I was doing. But the kids really recognize, they come up to you afterward and say, hey, DTE, hey, Matt, thank you for, bidding on this animal. Even if you don't buy it, you're driving the price up and you're allowing, and a lot of these kids are using this for next year's fair for their animals or to go to college or to go to some technical school. So it's a big deal. We were able to get notebook computers for, I think, the elementary school in Merrill, which is part of the Meridian community. And then one of the things that really got me all choked up was Merrill High School was having a homecoming right in the middle of the pandemic. And they reached out to Jason and said, can you help us? We funded their homecoming. We were up there for the whole event and having, the Queen and her court come up to us and say, thank you for doing this. There was no way we were ever going to do this. If it wasn't for you guys. It's just, that was real life.
How awesome is that they get, you guys form such a strong relationship where they're that comfortable to come to you, knowing that they need that, right? And then you guys are able to deliver.
That's the kind of relationship we want to have in each of these communities. And like I think I mentioned, Meridian kind of set a new bar for us on how we want to do this stuff. And, frankly, Barton Malow helps us. Everybody gets this. If we don't do this well, the project's going to be harder to sustain.
So what is the impact of sustainability on our future?
We've set up goals that are similar to others. But, just in terms of metrics, we've got 18 wind parks online. Meridian will be our 19th. Meridian will be the largest single wind park in terms of megawatt capacity. It's going to be 77 fairly good-sized turbines, but 220 megawatts. And I know a megawatt doesn't mean a lot to people who might be listening to this, but, that could be a megawatt. You could say, well, a megawatt powers anywhere from 300 to 400 homes. And when Meridian goes online, we will be at almost 2,000 megawatts of wind energy. Got 33 solar parks working. Most of them are small. Have a lot of plans for a lot more solar. And right now we have enough clean energy in our portfolio to support power to about 700,000 homes. So, almost 750,000 homes are powered by renewable energy. Since 2009, we've invested or driven investment of about $3 billion related to renewables. And by 2025, we want to invest an additional almost twice that, about $2.8 billion. And by the time we go through that process in sort of the mid 2025s, we hope to be powering almost 1.5 million homes, about 1.3 million homes by renewables. So it's pretty exciting. A lot of work, a lot more to do.
Before we take off, we should mention that Barton Malow is part of the DTE Energy My Green Power Initiative, a program dedicated to increasing the amount of renewable energy to power homes and businesses. Through the program, 100% of the electricity use at Barton Malow's 110,000 square foot headquarters in Southfield, Michigan, is attributed to Michigan-made solar and wind energy.
And that's all for this episode of Said Differently. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. We'll be back soon with more stories from the John site. Thanks for listening.
For more information on DTE Energy's renewable energy initiatives, visit newlook.dteenergy.com. That's newlook.dteenergy.com. To learn more about Barton Malow's energy portfolio, visit bartonmalow.com. This is Said Differently, a Barton Malow podcast.